Today, we're diving into one of the most transformative periods in any person's life, adolescence. It's that incredible and, yeah, often turbulent phase that bridges childhood and adulthood. We're going to explore it not as just a series of problems, but as a really critical journey of change, biologically, psychologically, and socially. So, let's begin.
So here's our roadmap. We'll start with the transition itself, then we'll get into the deep, profound search for identity. From there, we'll look at the unique way the adolescent mind works, the essential push for independence from family, and finally, we'll touch on the high-risk terrain that many have to navigate along the way.
All right, so what is adolescence really? Well, it's that developmental stage where pretty much everything changes. And I mean a complete overhaul, biologically, cognitively, psychologically, socially, you name it. It's like a bridge between two completely different worlds, and let me tell you, walking across it is no simple task.
And this really gets to the heart of it. Adolescence isn't just about change, it's about the adjustment to that change. Teenagers have to constantly recalibrate their entire world, their relationship with their own changing body, their role in the family, and where they stand with their friends. Everything is in motion, all at the same time.
This brings us to the central psychological mission of being a teenager, figuring out who you are. The famous theorist Erik Erikson said this was the most critical task of this whole period, the quest to form a stable, coherent identity. It's all about moving past the roles you had as a kid to answer that huge question, who am I really?
Erikson actually called this specific struggle identity versus role confusion. Now, when he says crisis, don't think of it as a catastrophe. It's more like a crucial turning point. The teenager is basically pulled between two poles, forging a solid sense of self on one end, and on the other, feeling totally lost, confused, and unsure of their place in the world. It's that tension between finding yourself and feeling like you have no self at all.
What's so fascinating here is how this idea explains so much of the behavior we see in teens. Erikson argued that to figure out who they are, adolescents have to experiment. They need to try on different hats, so to speak. This is why you see the rapid shifts in style, in music, and friends. Testing extremes isn't just mindless rebellion. It's a necessary part of finding a stable center.
You know, this whole complex process really boils down to two key steps. First, there's exploration. That's where you're actively questioning the beliefs you grew up with and looking at all the alternatives. And that's followed by commitment, where you make a conscious choice to adopt a specific identity, a set of values, or a path forward for yourself.
Now, this whole journey is also shaped by some pretty dramatic shifts in thinking. As adolescents develop more complex reasoning skills, a fascinating and sometimes pretty difficult byproduct emerges. It's a tendency toward what psychologists call adolescent egocentrism. Hold on, this isn't about being selfish or arrogant in the way we usually mean it. Adolescent egocentrism is a very specific cognitive state. It's this intense self-focus where a teenager feels like their experiences are completely unique and that they are, in a sense, the main character on a huge stage. It's actually a natural result of their new ability to think about their own thoughts and imagine how others might see them. And this egocentrism shows up in two major ways. On the left, you've got the imaginary audience. That's the feeling that everyone is watching you, judging every little thing you do, which leads to that intense self-consciousness. Then on the right, you have the feeling of uniqueness, this deep conviction that your experiences are so singular that nobody else could possibly understand what you're going through. Both of these are really powerful forces.
Of course, this search for a personal identity plays out in a huge way within the family. I mean, to become your own person, you have to somehow differentiate yourself from your parents. This push for autonomy, this whole process of separation, isn't just natural, it's psychologically necessary to form an independent adult identity.
This quote, I think, just captures that sentiment perfectly. It might sound a little hurtful to a parent, but it's such a powerful example of this drive. It's not about rejecting the parent as a person, it's about rejecting the childhood dependency they represent. The teen is trying to carve out a public identity that is 100% their own.
And this drive for separation, well, it shows up in some very recognizable ways. It can look like challenging rules, criticizing family values as old-fashioned, or just automatically rejecting every suggestion a parent makes. And at the same time, you see this massive pivot towards the peer group. Friends become the main source of belonging and validation because they're outside of that family unit where the adolescent is still seen as a kid.
So, this intense period of exploration and separation, well, it can sometimes lead adolescents into some pretty challenging territory. This last part of our explainer looks at some of those pitfalls on the journey, specifically when it comes to high-risk behaviors.
Now, the crucial thing to understand here is the motivation. When teens engage in risky behaviors, it's rarely just for the thrill of it. Psychologically, it's often a way to test boundaries, to defy the established norms, and, maybe most importantly, to perform adulthood. It's a misguided but powerful way of trying to prove to themselves and everyone else that they aren't children anymore.
And these behaviors can take a lot of different forms. Eating disorders, for example, can come from an intense concern over a body that's changing so fast, and they become a way to exert control when everything else feels totally out of control. Substance use, or even getting into really adventurous or dangerous sports, can be seen as acts of defiance and a way to test personal limits, all serving that larger quest for an adult identity.
So as we've seen on this roadmap, the adolescent journey is messy, it's complex, but it's absolutely necessary. This leaves us with a final and I think really crucial question. Now that we understand the psychological drivers behind a behavior, how can we better support, guide, and empathize with the adolescents in our lives as they navigate this incredible transformation?